In my hands is a report from the Office for National Statistics that is pretty extraordinary. This one document changes the entire narrative around the state of the UK economy post-COVID. I mean, how do I sum this up? When I was younger, I'd go to my nan's in the summer holidays, and when everyone had gone to sleep, me and my cousin, being the little scroungers that we were, would get the sofas in the lounge, tip them upside down, we'd each be stood at one end, and then we'd shake it, just hoping that some quids would fall out. Nothing ever did, but we tried. Now, the ONS has been down the back of the UK's economic sofa. They didn't find sweet wrappers or the missing TV remote. No. They found 2% of the UK's GDP. Just a casual 44 billion down the back of the settee where everyone had forgotten about it. That's enough money to pay 2/3 of the NHS annual wage bill, or Neymar's wages for 17,600 weeks. 2% of GDP is around 1/3 of what this country spends educating children each year, which I guess is sort of fitting, because it seems like to me nowadays, it doesn't matter if it's a geography class or an economic forecast, nothing in the UK is concrete anymore.
A rare bit of good news for the UK.
The bad news we had was an accurate, extraordinary GDP upgrade.
The UK economy is nearly 2% bigger.
That was Black Magic by the Amazons, bit of a tune really, but also sort of how I felt when I saw headlines like this hitting my screen. What sort of politically motivated black magic number fudging is this? Until this point, the narrative around the UK, economically speaking, was that it had still not hit pre-pandemic levels in terms of GDP, and that it was firmly in last place when it came to growth compared to our peers post-pandemic. You'll have probably seen charts like this which show you what I mean. But the ONS's deep dive down the back of the Davenport means the UK is no longer the worst performing member of the G7. In fact, it's right in the middle of the pack, recovering from COVID quicker than France and Germany. So this paper is called The Impact of the Blue Book 2023 Changes to GDP. The Blue Book is a nickname for a publication from the ONS because traditionally important government documents were bound in blue leather. But it's officially called the United Kingdom National Accounts. It's a full overview of the economic performance of the UK, and one of the key things that it looks to measure is GDP, or Gross Domestic Product, which we could say is a measure of the size and the overall economic health of a country. But understandably, measuring the size of an economy is a pretty tricky thing to do. The Bank of England themselves admits on their page about GDP, there is never enough data to build a picture on the economy that's 100% complete. So what happens is over time, as we get more information, the ONS uses these blue books to tweak and correct the estimates. It's very normal and it's very understandable, but this time it's different. Let's look at how big these revisions are.
This is good, like things are not as bad.
At the end of 2021, everyone thought the UK economy was about 1.2% smaller than it was before the first lockdown. But now the ONS is saying that actually the UK had fully recovered from a GDP sense within 18 months of that lockdown. There are massive changes to the numbers everywhere in this. Instead of shrinking 11% in 2020, they now think the economy went backwards by 10.4%. If we look at the largest part of the UK economy, which is the service sector, we really get a sense for how much revision there has been in the numbers in just the last 12 months. The dark blue data is the 2022 Blue Book and the 2023 one is in light blue. Now you might be sitting there going, Damien, this is great. Turns out we're doing better than we thought, beating the Germans and the French. All of that is true, and of course it's good news that the UK is doing better than we first thought. But before we break out the bunting and have a good old-fashioned UK street party, we need to first consider that hidden in this really obscure document is an admission from the ONS that they got it wrong by a pretty large margin. And that error has just wiped away the narrative that's dragged down UK sentiment now for years. We were the sick man of Europe, who through a combination of Brexit and bad politics had stagnated to the point where we'd gone from being a global superpower to being compared to an emerging market.
I want you to give me a bit of a push.
Economic data like this shapes the decisions of people in this country who control the country. And if the input data is wrong, then the decisions that are outputted, well, they will also be wrong. These forecasts don't just create headlines. They influence how much the government will borrow, how much they will spend, if they need to raise taxes or cut them, and then companies will make decisions on whether or not they're going to invest in the UK based on the numbers contained in reports like this. This incorrect analysis from the ONS could mean that Britain's missed out on billions in investment. The ONS had one job, and while in a moment we'll look at why that is a hard job, it's important to say that the numbers being wrong is a pretty big cock-up, and it definitely deserves our attention. As I record this, the BBC currently has a live stream documenting every inch of the Birmingham City Council bankruptcy. But you know, this story, which highlights major issues in one of the government's most important departments and also unravels 3 years of destructive narrative, discussion, political and business decisions, The BBC gives it 500 words. I'm from Birmingham, right? Originally from Brookvale, Erdington, 0121, love the place. But the whole economic output of Birmingham is 18 billion a year. The ONS just found double that out of nowhere. Mainstream media's priorities and where they choose to shine their light continues to baffle me. One news publication that doesn't baffle me is today's video sponsor, The Daily Upside. But I am a little bit baffled as to why you haven't signed up yet. Just to remind you, it's a completely free business newsletter that gets sent to your email inbox every day. They cover all sorts of global business and finance news, and they always seem to find fresh and interesting topics. Like this one that discusses the thoughts of some of the staff at YouTube who are worried about the focus on short-form content. You're only getting long-form content from me, guys, so it looks like I'll be going down with the ship. I do love the Daily Upside, and I'm sure you will too. So I've pinned a link in the comment section below for you, and there's also one in the description as well. All you need to do is click it, put in your email, and that is it. As I said, it's completely free, and you can always unsubscribe if you don't like it. Okay, let's get back to the video and answer, how has this happened? People will say the ONS has become unreliable, or that they've always been unreliable. I mean, this is the same organisation that declared 1 in 67 Muslims are transgender. I can't speak to the competence of the staff at the ONS, I don't work there. But I did find an interesting discussion online that pointed out that when they relocated their offices from London to Newport, 90% of experienced staff left the organisation instead of relocating. While I'm sure that Newport is a lovely place, I wouldn't have labelled it a hotbed of economics personally. But anyway, let's not speculate. Instead, let's look at the reasons the ONS have provided for this mess up. These revisions are mainly because we have richer data from our annual surveys and administrative data. We're now able to measure costs incurred by businesses directly, and we can adjust for prices at a far more detailed level. Okay, so they have better available data for the period in question. And I think what's important here is the period of time that we're discussing. Let's just give the ONS the benefit of the doubt here for a moment. Let's say you asked me to tell you how much everything is worth in my house, and you wanted that number each year. If this was the first time you'd asked me, I might be able to give you an estimate, but it probably wouldn't be that accurate. Over time though, I could make things more accurate. My calculations would improve as I'd have time to go around the house, pricing up everything. As the years rolled on as well, the forecast from previous years would become more accurate because I'd have more accurate data, and also any changes to what was in my house would be minor relative to the whole picture. You know, things leaving that I get rid of and things that I buy, I'll be able to keep tabs on those easier. Now imagine that process, but on a national scale. If we look at this chart, which measures the service sector between 1998 and today, we can see that in the latest Blue Book, they've made amendments to data even from decades ago. This is a feature of them applying a new methodology that they feel is a better way of measuring GDP, which we will look at in a second. But look how significant the revisions are more recently. This begs the question again of how could they be that off? But back to the house analogy for a second, and let's cut the ONS some more slack. What happens if someone robbed my home? Ransacked the whole place? How accurate do you think my estimation of the value of the contents of my home would be year one after that event? COVID, lockdown, and all of that was the economic equivalent of my house being turned upside down. And it will take a while to understand the full impact it had on the economy and to really measure that. The ONS points to specific information that's come in that's helped them reform the calculations, and this includes more information on business spending and better understanding of business stock levels. They now think that businesses piled up stock, increasing stock levels instead of running the stock down. Also, they have better information on how much people earned through the pandemic and more information on household spending. One part of me wants to sit here and go, your only job is to measure this stuff. How could you get it so wrong? Other countries aren't making these sort of revisions to their data. I mean, more on that in a second, actually. And another part of me, though, is saying this country has leapt from one disaster to the next in recent years. And I can only imagine how hard it is to track everything through these unprecedented times. And they are unprecedented. So rather than this being, maybe it's just them unraveling this mess that's been the UK. The one positive here, though, is the numbers have improved. I would always like to hear that the UK is doing better than we thought it was. And I know Jeremy Hunt is definitely feeling pretty relieved about it all. Those determined to talk down the British economy have been proved wrong. I mean, proven wrong is a strong line considering that the proof Jeremy's holding up has been produced by an organisation that's just disproven its own data from 12 months before. But I'm sure behind the scenes, Jeremy's pretty mad at the ONS, and rightfully so. His political party has been judged on the numbers produced by the ONS and our relative standings versus other countries, and I'm sure the Conservatives would have liked this information 18 months ago. as the comparisons with other countries have been a major thorn in the Conservative side these last few years. On one hand, it's good news that we found out that we're not lagging our peers, but on the other, it raises concerns around the competence of the ONS, because why would our international peers be able to track GDP accurately, and we're all jumping all over the place? Well, within the document, we may have an answer to this. So without getting too technical, the main reason for the changes that I could find is the UK is applying what's called an SUT framework to the calculation for GDP. This is an internationally accepted way of calculating GDP. I've included a document below from the UN which goes into more detail on this if you're interested. The OECD has stated the UK is one of the first countries to estimate the 2020-2021 period using this SUT framework. The UK and the US are the only two countries in the G7 who have applied this way of measuring the data to the time period in question. So, if changing the way we measured things led to a significant change in the outcome, maybe as other countries apply this same framework, they will also revise their numbers, for better or for worse. Our international comparison position is likely to change once other countries fully confront their data sets over time. So before everyone starts going all, claiming the UK is not falling behind, we might want to wait until everyone else has done their tally first as well. Because there's a few things we might expect to happen. Mainly, everyone else readjusts their numbers and the UK is back of the queue again. Or how about they apply the framework, their numbers won't change all that much at all, and then we're sat here wondering, how has the ONS got it this wrong? There are some other bits we need to consider here as well. So the period in question that's been revised covers COVID, yes, but the last 2 years in the UK haven't been revised yet. And these are some of the worst years for the cost of living crisis. How will that reflect in the data? Also, can we just acknowledge that GDP is an awful measure for quality of life? And it's not like, with this news suddenly hitting, everyone at home's going, oh, you know what, Damo, you're right. I feel 2% better than I did about the last few years before watching this video. When I was going through all of my research as well, for this video, I stumbled across a line on the ONS's website that really made me sit here and think. We're only interested in society as a whole and not you as an individual. It's the ONS basically saying we don't want your data to spy on you, we want it for our own measurements. But it rings with this brutal sentiment of disregard for the little guy, doesn't it? But make no mistake, the actions of this organisation affect us all, as a nation and as individuals. The ONS claims to be impartial, unbiased and independent. They should report facts and facts only. But a misstep of this magnitude makes their statistical analysis seem less like math and more like black magic!